What's up, guys? Polk here. Welcome back for another episode of, I don't know, kind of the vlog. I'm not really sure anymore, but this session specifically is going to be one of our live streams over on the Lodge Live YouTube channel. As some of you probably already know, Wednesdays and Fridays I stop by the Lodge and play on stream, with the Wednesday game being 5, 10, 20 with a 5K cap, and the Friday game being some uncapped 25, 50 no limit hold'em. So I'm going to be breaking down some of these sessions for you, and let's start with this first one that I played just a couple weeks ago. Our session begins with everyone buying in for $5,000 because this thing's capped at $5,000. The lineup's a good one. We've got a lot of players you might recognize in here, including DQ, Andrew Nemi, Brad Owen, Coins, a lot of different guys here at the table that you might have seen if you've watched some Lodge streams in the past, and some fresh faces as well. I've only been seated at the table for a few moments before I get my first big hand. The action folds around me on the button, and I wake up with pocket jacks, or should I say jiggities, as I raise and face a 3-bet from Brad Owen in the blinds, who looks down at ace king offsuit. Now, with pocket jacks here, once in a while you can go for the 4-bet, but we're looking at a situation where the big blind is 40 bucks. It straddled this hand. So I could try and get the money in, but it's also reasonable to play for a flat. This is one of those spots where you mainly want to call, but every now and then you probably want to mix in a 4-bet to keep your opponent honest. Anyway, I do decide to just go ahead and make the call, and we take a flop. The flop comes 10-9-6 rainbow, a great flop for jacks. No overcards to scare us, although there are some hands like 10s and 9s that could have moved into the lead. What I'm most concerned about pre-flop, though, are hands like ace king, ace queen, king queen. None of those have improved, and I'm looking pretty good. Brad checks it over to me, and at this point, you really don't want to be slow playing your jacks. You want to be betting, building this pot. Most of the hands that will check call you are going to be hands that, frankly, you want to be check calling, and also this hand is somewhat vulnerable compared to maybe some other value bets. Regardless, when we do bet here, we want to go with a very small size, the idea being we let ourselves value bet thinly, and we can bet at a higher frequency when facing a check, and we put hands like ace king and ace queen in a very tough spot. We go ahead and bet just $275 here on the flop into a pot that's about 850 bucks. And Brad does decide to make the check call, and we take a turn. The turn's a queen completing the rainbow, and it's a little bit of an interesting card. It's definitely possible my opponent hit this queen. If he decided to check call a hand like king queen or king jack or queen jack, all of those hands have now improved. Now, I would expect those hands to bet the flop or check raise the flop a decent amount, so I don't think he has too many of those hands, but they're definitely in there. If I bet this turn and I get raised, well, I'm going to be pretty unhappy, and if I bet this turn and I get called, I don't really have room to go 3 streets for value. When you see those two factors and your opponent checks to you, you mainly want to check it back, so I do, and let's take a river. The river comes in offsuit 5, and Brad checks once again. I think it's worth noting Brad should likely be betting here some of the time. It's a situation where ace king probably isn't good. There are so many hands that have improved, and he also doesn't have that many hands that are weaker. Yeah, if he check called a hand like ace 8 suited or ace 7 suited, those would be worker, maybe even an ace jack every now and then, but a lot of those hands are going to choose to bet, and he really has almost nothing that could possibly be worse than those holdings. So I think once in a while a bet here from Brad makes sense, but I don't mind the check either. In my shoes, once he checks, I feel like my hand is pretty close, but you can probably go for a bet. It might be a little bit too thin. I'm not entirely sure. It's right on the cusp. Certainly a queen is going to go for some value with a 2/3 pot size, and a hand like a 9 or a 10 would probably be a bit too thin. But when I have jacks and not a 10, makes it a little more likely Brad has something like jack 10 suited or 10 8 suited, although the jacks do block the jack 10 suited pretty hard, so maybe not that hand specifically. But regardless, makes it a little more likely he has some kind of pair that can check call, and I would expect a queen to be betting this river for value if he didn't bet the turn. I bet 900 bucks, Brad folds, and we take it down off to a nice little start here at the start of the session.
The Jiggies! Wow!
What a read there. What a read there by Brad.
At this point, the session's been going on for a while, and people are starting to get ready to gamble, so we decided to bump up the stakes to 5, 10, 20, 40, 80, 160, 320, and that's going to happen when you get 5 minutes into a stream. At this point, people just want to gamble. Chase limps in the button with king 10 offsuit, and DQ decides to bump it up with the jack 9 suited, making it 1.4K with 3.7K behind. Folds to us in the biggest straddle with the ace queen. This is a no-brainer. Remember, guys, in this spot, the big blind's effectively 320. So what we really have in front of us here is 17-ish big blinds. And with 17 big blinds, the cards play themselves. But will the flop, turn, and river play themselves as well?
does indeed call, but the Jack-9 of hearts
Oh,
it is
man,
live,
I'm not liking this one
and
bit
we
right
have
now.
an 11K pot run it once Max Payne.
Let's listen in.
Oh, come on. Come on, really?
Picks up more
Oh,
outs.
my Lord.
6 ball now live.
Deuce, deuce, quick deuce. Oh,
There's the
nice. That's a
queen.
good card.
It's a great card. Now I'm dead with 10.
Or a 6.
10 or a 6.
Oh,
And
the
there
6!
is the 6.
Right.
And Doug gives his winnings from last night's free roll
Just like that.
over to DQ.
7 hours of hard-fought poker last night. Poof, thin air, dust.
Another session of the Lodge, another bad beat. Feel like this has happened before. Getting crushed at the Lodge. All right. Anyway, we're just a few minutes into the stream, and I'm already stuck $5,000. Let's carry on. I'm not involved in this next hand, but a player named Chase at the table went to order some coffee and almost missed his hand. I'm pretty sure he's glad he came back for this one.
It does
Both
not.
players hit their bow. All the money should go in here.
Absolutely.
Threshold is high. It's high right now.
Coins waste no time. Snap call, and he sees the bad news.
Oh, and now I'm administering it. Good.
Reaching into his pocket quickly for the reload. Chase, welcome to the table.
Our next hand, the hijack, opens it up with the ace-4 clubs, and it folds to me in the big blind with the pocket queens. Now, I decided to make it $600 to go a little bit bigger here because we're out of position, and Slicer decides to take a flop. The flop comes ace-8 deuce with 2 hearts, and this flop is brought to you by coinflex.us. That's right, CoinFlex is now available here in the United States, and they have no trading fees on their platform. That's right, you can trade cryptocurrency over on CoinFlex with no trading fees whatsoever. Head on over now to coinflex.us. Disclaimer, that was an ad, and cryptocurrencies can lose, well, a lot of value. Anyway, the flop comes ace-8 deuce with 2 hearts. Bit of a tough spot. This is one of those situations that's hard to manage out of position. You have queens with no heart. I don't mind checking here. I think I'd probably mix up a little bit of both, but my pre-flop range has a lot more aces when I 3-bet than his flatting range does. So I think a high frequency c-bet here for a small 1/3 pot size probably makes sense, which we decided to go for. Our opponent's got top pair. He's going nowhere. This is obviously a good spot when you do have the top pair. He makes the call, and we take a turn. The turn comes the King of Hearts, a terrible card for us with queens, but in a way it's kind of nice. This card is so bad that we can pretty safely give up and not worry too much. If we get bluffed, so be it. We simply just have a completely atrocious hand here. We've got lots of other hands that would make sense to continue with if we face aggression. We check it over to Slicer, and he decides to go for a 1/3 pot value bet, even versus 1/3 pot. Don't think we're getting the odds with our queens without a heart. We could have hands like an ace or a king, or even just pairs with a heart. Anything. Give me anything that's not the queens here on this board, and we let it go and take a loss.
You send your cards into the mug. Folds the queen.
Moving on, we have a hand here now where I have 10-8 offsuit. Coins decides just to call the straddle. Straddle up to $160 this hand. Remember, guys, important to note these straddles because they drastically change the hand. Calls the 160. I decide just to complete with the 10-8 offsuit, and the big blind checks with the jack-3. Biggest blind. Biggest straddle. Whatever. The flop comes 10-9-8 rainbow. A phenomenal flop when you have the 10-8 offsuit. We flop top and bottom pair. We're very likely good against the field with a hand this strong. But a lot of draws here, and we need to take the betting lead in order to try and build this pot and make those draws have to pay. We bet 325 here on the flop, roughly a half pot bet, and we get a call from the big blind. The turn's the 9, pairing the board. Not a great card for us now, of course. Our 2 pair is counterfeit, but this is kind of a cool hand. We can check and try and show down. And if our opponent gets out of line, well, we can always give him the old check raise because we'll definitely have the 10-9 and 9-8 as well. The river comes in 8, double pairing the board. It's a bit of an interesting spot. You could go ahead and argue for a value bet here, but if my opponent does have an 8, I might be able to get more value if I check raise. Remember, if they have an 8, they have 8s full of 9s, and I have 8s full of 10s. So, spot where I can check raise and get value when they do actually have an 8. Also, if my opponent just has some brick draw, like I'm going to make up a hand. Let's just say Jack-3 offsuit. Well, I might get him to take a stab. Chase obliges and bets half pot, $625 to go on the river. I decide it's time for the price of poker to go up.
Fearful of 9s full, but I don't think he can fold. And he's going to raise it on up. Goes for the check raise. And Chase bluffing at it will fold.
Think about all the big pots we've played, and we are 33 minutes into the session. That's when you know it's going to be a good one. Next up, we have another straddled hand. This one straddled to $80, and the action folds around to Andrew Namey, who raises it up with the ace-5 of diamonds. We are in the position to his left and decide just to make the call with the king-jack off. Could argue for a 3-bet, could argue for maybe even an occasional fold, but we're playing some poker, ladies and gentlemen. We make the call, and the action folds to Brad in the largest straddle, and he makes the call, and look at that. Me, Brad, and Andrew playing some poker. The flop comes 10-7 deuce, 3 clubs, everybody whiffs. I have the king of clubs in my hand and 2 overs. Andrew's got the backdoor nut flush draw, and Brad simply has nothing. Andrew checks. I decide to take a stab here for 1/3 pot, just bang $250 into the pot. Brad gets out of the way, and the action's back over to Andrew. With the backdoor nut flush draw, a lot of stuff's on the table here. If you wanted to make a prudent laydown, that would probably be all right. Check calling to try and realize your equity / have some showdown value seems okay too. And I wouldn't even mind seeing a check fold every now and again. You are out of position, and our SBR here is not that deep because this was straddled up to $80 pre-flop. Andrew does decide to go ahead and make the check call, and once again checks the turn. In my shoes here, I have the king of clubs. I have a gutter on this offsuit 8, so it's a nice hand to bet again. My opponent's less likely to have a flush draw that can check call. I now have more outs that I can improve to win, and a lot of those middling cards hit my range a lot stronger than Andrew's because I'm more likely to bet hands like straight draws on the flop than he is to check call them. Anyway, I go ahead and fire the turn, and Andrew has simply nothing to go on here, so he has to lay down the ace high, and we take it down.
Late session yesterday, I think he won a couple thousand last night playing the 4.
Now 45 minutes into the stream. 45 minutes. We finally wake up with a big premium holding. Pocket aces. We've had jacks, queens, ace, queen, and now aces, and we're not even 1 hour into the stream. Coins looks down at the king, jack suited. He opens it up under the gun. This hand will be straddled to... No, this is actually not straddled. Huh. That's weird. He raised up to $75 to go. Action folds to us in the hijack, and we look down at pocket aces. Let's go. By the way, lucky break for Brad here. Looks down at the 7 deuce, but not playing the 7 deuce game today. Running hot, Brad. You might have gotten stacked there if this game was a little bit different. Anyway, we raised up to 275. Caitlin wakes up with the pocket 8s here in the blinds. We have a tough spot for 8s. Definitely a spot you could look to maybe just fold your 8s or even come in for a 4-bet. It's a situation where even though your hand's pretty strong, given the 2 ranges in front of you, I'd probably likely just give that one up. But she does make the call. Coins calls as well. Certainly standard call with the king jack suited, and we take a flop. The flop comes 10-9-5, 2 diamonds. Both my opponents check over to me. We're not letting turn the cards come off here for free. In a spot like this, maybe once in a while you could trap, but realistically, you're going to want to bet and build this pot. Yes, it's possible my opponents flop a set of 10s or a set of 9s, but the reality is that's way less likely than them having hands like they do have here, and we want to get some value. We bet $600 here, a healthy 2/3 pot size bet on the flop, and both of my opponents decide to stick around. The turn is a great one, an offsuit 6. Yes, if my opponent had 8-7 suited, they got there, but the vast majority of hands have not improved, and we're still feeling quite good about our aces. The bet on the turn here is going to be a little bit strange because our opponents have 4K and 1.7K. So anything you bet here is going to be committing against coins. And we decide it's time just to jam. $4,000 effective to go over to Caitlin. With the pocket 8s, can't really imagine much you can do here other than fold. Even if you think your opponent might have a draw, what are you going to do? You're not even closing the action. The player behind you woke up with a big hand. Well, you'd be stacked there as well. Eventually, she lets it go. So does coins, and we take down yet another pot. We go card dead for a bit on the stream here now, and we also take a quick break, especially because some guys showed up with some pretty sweet merch. That's right, Luke Schwartz on the front, his PokerStars cash game graph in the back. Beautiful. I could see these being big sellers. Not gonna lie, I was a little disappointed with how many people at the lodge asked me, who's that on the front? And they had never heard of Luke Schwartz before. Kind of hurts the joke when they don't know who it is, and also makes me feel bad that apparently people weren't following all my petty feuds over the years, but what are you going to do? All right, enough jibber-jabbering around. I'll play a couple of other pots here and there, but now we got to get down to the main event, our big pot of the evening, and it's a doozy. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Our hand begins at 5, 10, 20, 40, where I'm putting on the $40 straddle. Action folds around to DQ, who looks down at the ace-7 of clubs. He's got $12,000 and opens it up to 235. Everyone else gets out of the way. Action on me in the big blind. I decided to 3-bet with the 8-5 of spades on roughly an $11,000 stack. Now, I do have to say here for a moment, I know this is a little bit on the loose side, but we are in position in a spot where we're going to have a lot of re-raises, and it puts our opponent in a pretty tough spot. He does decide to call. We are stepping outside the lane of some GTO poker, and let's take a flop. Also, quick note, DQ basically beat me into the pot here pre-flop. He knew where he was at. The flop comes 8-6 tray, 2 diamonds. We move into the lead here with our top pair, and we can feel pretty good about it. DQ checks it over to us, as he should with all of his hands. And now, we're going to go ahead and go for a fairly small bet, 1/3 pot here on the flop. The logic is we're going to be ahead of all of the hands that can check call, and let's just get some thin value. We're going to have a lot of overpairs. We want to bet this pot and build it and punish our opponent. So by betting small, we allow ourselves room to value bet thinly and also set up multiple streets for value with our big hands. DQ decides to just go ahead and check call. I wouldn't mind seeing a check raise from him here on this flop. He has some turns with some playability where he can jam and he unblocks diamonds. I think once in a while he should get in there, but mainly check calling does seem good. The turn comes another 8. 3 of a kind here, and we have a very strong hand. DQ checks once more, and now we're turning up the heat with a 2/3, 3/4 pot size bet, 2.2 thousand to go. When we have 3 of a kind here, we really should be betting. We want to charge these draws. Plenty of hands out there that our opponent could have that are drawing. And if our opponent check jams, we're happy just to snap them off. Anyway, DQ with a nut flush draw. If he's ahead of us, well, there's no reason to jam. So he should just check call, see if he can get there, and maybe showdown versus a bluff. He does make the check call, and let's take a river. The river comes an absolute disaster. 10 of clubs. DQ backdoors the nut flush against me. However, there's just about 7K in the pot, and I have around 7K behind. My opponent's going to have to call with a lot of other hands than just flushes. He can have hands like diamonds. He could have a hand like jacks. He could have a hand like nines. He could have a hand like ace-6 suited. He can have so many other hands here, but he does have the nut flush, and if he makes this call, I'm going to get stacked. At this point, though, he starts to feel a little bit like he might be behind. Maybe I've got the pocket 10s. He feels like he's going to get stacked with the nut flush. He loses to just full houses. I also thought I was good when he started tanking, but, you know, sometimes you learn your lesson here, guys. The lesson is don't step outside the lane of GTO poker. No, the lesson here is you can't be afraid of monsters in the closet, especially when you beat all 3 of a kinds and other flushes and bluffs. So, you know, nice call from DQ, but maximum pain delivered. I saw a lot of comments in the chat too. People saying, why would you go all in here? That's $7,000. The pot 7K, guys. You can't be a nit. Pot size bet left behind. Also, he's more likely to have diamonds than clubs because he did check call the flop. What are you going to do? Unfortunately for me, I couldn't overcome these big hands I lost along the way and ended up losing $8.5 thousand on the stream. Not a great result at the lodge. But we gave it our best, and we have plenty more sessions to choose from. And guys, if you like these streams, head on over to the Lodge Live. I'll put a link in the description below. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, we got streams going. I'll be involved in the Wednesday and Friday ones. And the 13th and 14th this week, high stakes poker coming at you. 100, 200. If we get this video out in time. Hope we do. All right, guys, I'll see you then. See you over in the Lodge live stream. Thank you for tuning in. Peace.